Thank you for joining the UDNF Peers Tell Me More lecture, Meeting Unmet Needs. UDN Peer meets the UDNF. My name is Christine McGarvey. I am the director of the UDNF Peer Tell Me More lecture series. I am also a UDNF Peer member and a UDN participant, as well as a mother of a UDN participant. Today, we are going to meet the past and present peer co-chairs to discuss the future as the UDN peer merges with the UDNF. Current activities of the UDNF peer aimed at improving the participant experience and connecting families will be discussed. And today we are joined with Amy Gray, who is the CEO of the Undiagnosed Disease Network Foundation. She has more than 2 decades of extensive fundraising, operations, and patient advocacy experiences shaped by her previous roles working with 4 national nonprofit voluntary health organizations. As CEO, Amy's role is to work with the board and staff to improve access to diagnosis, research, and care for all individuals living with an undiagnosed and ultra-rare condition. Amy is a graduate of St. Cloud University in Minnesota, and she lives in South Florida with her husband and children. And Amy is going to discuss a little bit about the merge with the UDN Peer and the UDNF. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you, Christine, for the warm welcome, and thank you for all that you do for the community. You are an incredible advocate and ambassador for the UDN and the UDNF. Today, to kick off our Tell Me More lecture, I wanted to spend some time briefly talking about the power of patient advocacy. Almost every nonprofit organization in the healthcare space, disease-related organizations, and certainly in the rare disease community has been born from the passion of patients and families. There are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of examples of this, but there's 2 examples that I wanted to touch on here today first. So, consider the well-known patient advocacy organization, the American Cancer Society. American Cancer Society was formed in 1913 by a doctor whose family member had cancer. And this physician was really touched by the impact that cancer had on his family member and knew that there needed to be more that was done to research what causes different types of cancer. And there needed to be more done to support patients and families that were dealing with a cancer diagnosis. And that was really what, formed the American Cancer Society back over 100 years ago. And it started very, simply with some doctors coming together to host a meeting to talk about what kind of work could be done to start investigating and researching the causes of cancer. With also a heavy emphasis on just creating public awareness about cancer and what patients and families deal with the cancer diagnosis, and starting to put some support programs together for the cancer community. Another example that comes to mind in the rare disease space is the National Organization for Rare Diseases, or NORD, which was formed by parents that were frustrated by the lack of research and support for rare diseases. And I think we can all appreciate the work that NORD has done over the years. They actually were founded in 1983. Right after the same group of patients and families came together to advocate for the Orphan Drug Act, which in 1983 was passed and has been so instrumental in bringing companies into the drug development space for orphan drugs or for rare diseases. But also what came from that is not only the founding of NORD itself, but the founding of so many other rare disease organizations and the work of so many other rare disease patients and families, creating this incredible momentum for rare disease advocacy, education, and support. So now, when you think about our community, the undiagnosed and ultra rare disease community, we've been so fortunate to have peer advocating on our behalf, peer working with other patients and families enrolled in the UDN, peer playing a critical role in providing support, resources for community members. Peer also, as you probably well know, was instrumental in ensuring that the UDN funding was sustained and would continue, when that funding was in question. And not only was Peer instrumental in securing that funding a year and a half ago, but they are also really instrumental in coming together and saying that funding is not enough for the UDN. Our community needs more. And so Peer members advocated to create the foundation, and were really the ones that help, give birth to the UDN Foundation and really make it what it is today. So when we started thinking about, the power of, the patient advocates in our community and the opportunity that we had with the foundation to kind of take those patient advocates and their passion and engage with them and use the infrastructure of the newly founded foundation to offer even more to the community, it was obvious that we wanted, and it only made sense to integrate our efforts and really align our efforts in a way that would give us an even bigger, louder voice to create even more for this community that so deserves it. So recently, within the last few months, UDN Peer has become UDNF Peer, and we've completely integrated and combined our efforts together, really aligning around some key initiatives that we'll be working on to serve the undiagnosed and ultra-rare disease community. You'll be hearing a little bit about that today throughout the rest of the session. Those efforts really revolve around 4 pillars. The pillars are, ensuring that patients are put at the center of research, and that we bridge research and clinical care for the community, and different initiatives that bring that patient voice and that patient perspective to research and clinical care. The second pillar is around support and navigation, and helping patients and families navigate the UDN, but also navigate living with an undiagnosed or ultra-rare condition, and providing support and resources, and building those resources out to serve the community. The third pillar is around community and advocacy, and engaging with the community, building a community for the undiagnosed and ultra-rare disease community, like we see in so many other, rare diseases. There are patient organizations that are serving them, and there's a community for people to turn to. We are working with Peer to build that community for the undiagnosed and ultra-rare disease community. And then, of course, continuing to advocate for funding to continue to sustain and grow the Undiagnosed Diseases Network's efforts, but also to sustain and grow the foundation so we can do even more to serve the community. And one example of that is the funding we've received from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative to launch our Patient Family Navigation Program. We want to continue to advocate and raise funds to launch additional programs like that to serve the community where we know there are needs and gaps in services. So again, Peer is made up of a dozen incredible, passionate patient and family advocates. But we need, and as powerful, of a group as they are, and they are a very powerful and mighty group, we need more people to join our efforts, and we need more families to get involved so we can continue to do more to serve the community. So we're going to invite you today, as you listen in, to think about ways in which you can engage with Peer, you can engage with the foundation, you can get involved, and we'll talk a little bit more about how you can do that, at the end of the session today. But we know that a crucial step for us in advancing the work for undiagnosed diseases and supporting families upon a diagnosis and helping them get to therapy options into clinical trials is to get as many people in this community involved and engaged so we can accelerate our work together. So again, thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it back to Christine to welcome our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Amy. As Amy said, you will hear from her at the end, where she'll discuss ways that you can get involved and also future events. Just a reminder that if you have any questions at any point during this lecture, you can use the Q&A function, and we will have a Q&A session at the end. It's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, Sarah Marshall, who was the past Peer co-chair. She has been on UDN, now UDNF Peer, since 2018. Her work in undiagnosed and ultra-rare disease is fueled by both the intimate understanding of what it is to be undiagnosed or have a child that is undiagnosed, but also by the inspirational work that those that she has been surrounded by in this community for the past 6 years. With a master's degree in social work, she is no stranger to advocacy work. In tandem with her rare disease advocacy, she works as a case manager for women and children, primarily immigrant and other marginalized groups who live with chronic disease. Her work helps ensure that their basic needs are met so they can prioritize taking their medicine and leading healthy lives. She resides in Minnesota and is the proud mom to almost 4 fully grown and launched young women ages 23, 22, 20, and 15. Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us.
Thank you, Christine. And thank you everyone for joining us. I am gonna share my screen, and I always feel like this is the hardest part of any Zoom. So just bear with me. All right. Let's see here. Okay. This picture I'm starting with is actually a picture that was just taken a few weeks ago in DC, where representatives from the UDN and the UDNF met for their annual meeting. So I thought I would share that. Let's see here. What am I going to do here? Okay. All right. Okay, so my peer story begins before I knew what peer was, or even before it existed. My daughter, Phoebe, my 4th child, was born healthy in 2008. She had her first bout of pneumonia at 6 months old, and being a seasoned mom, this didn't really make me blink twice. Eventually into toddlerhood, her infections were like clockwork every 30 days. Again, while it was exhausting and did seem to be a little much, I had no idea what laid ahead. At the time, I remember thinking that my second kid had had very frequent ear infections, so I just kind of chalked it up to something that was similar, but just a bit more intense. Into early childhood came exquisite joint pain, liver issues, muscle weakness, and threats to her vision. With every symptom, a new specialist was visited. And because there were so many symptoms and there were so many new symptoms all of the time, many of which did not make sense to me or any of her doctors, I kept some of her symptoms secret for fear of not being believed. And I found myself increasingly isolated, yet desperate for answers. At one point, perhaps around 4 or 5 years old, one of her specialists uncovered a novel notion to me that Phoebe was undiagnosed and that medicine did not yet have an answer to my question, which was, what is her diagnosis? I'll never forget that conversation because it was the one thing that has kept me going from giving up. It fueled my insistence that there was an answer to be found. I first heard about the Undiagnosed Diseases Network in 2016 from a local mom that I somehow found whose daughter had passed away from a fatal neurodegenerative disease. At that point, Phoebe had easily seen a dozen different specialists, both locally and out of state, had countless ER visits, several surgeries and hospitalizations. And to learn that there was an entire network devoted to people like her felt like a ray of light. Phoebe was accepted into the program and was evaluated in the spring of 2017. In the fall of that same year, my genetic counselor reached out to me asking if I would be interested in applying to be on what she described as the UDN Patient Advisory Council. Immediately, I said yes. And I remember thinking how much I wanted to be on this council. I really had no idea what it entailed. I just wanted to belong. Being on social media, I had longed to belong to one of those groups on Facebook, the autoimmune group, the immune deficiency group, the cancer group. I didn't belong to any of those. And I had no one to ask about, this symptom or that test. I wanted to belong in a space that people understood what it meant to have serious symptoms and had seen doctor after doctor with no answers. I wanted to belong to a group that understood what it was like to be undiagnosed. No one I knew, not my family and not my friends, understood what it was like to have your 5-year-old tell you that she sees spots in her field of vision and later be told that she has a vision-threatening diagnosis. Or understand the experience of your 7-year-old suddenly screaming in pain, clutching her abdomen, and have her thank you for taking care of her because she thinks she's dying as you race to the ER. No one even came close to understanding the terror of having a child that was undiagnosed and the constant state of hypervigilance that I lived in. The year Phoebe was born was the same year the UDN's predecessor was born. The Undiagnosed Diseases Program was established in 2008 at the National Institutes of Health to advance discovery and provide answers for patients with conditions that had long eluded diagnosis. The strategy of the UDP included deep phenotyping, collaborating clinical expertise, and advanced diagnostics. Each participant was evaluated by multidisciplinary teams of specialists, clinicians, researchers, and data scientists who pooled their knowledge and extensive experience and employed novel approaches to solve these medical mysteries. The groundbreaking work of the UDP was so innovative and successful that the NIH Common Fund elected to support the program's expansion into a network of medical research centers in 2013, known as the Undiagnosed Diseases Network. The UDN consisted of 12 sites, including the NIH UDP, supported by a coordinating center, and 4 core resources, which were the sequencing core, model organisms, metabolomics, and biorepository core, along with an advisory panel of external experts. This visionary group also put together and folded in a group of participants and parents organized into the group called PEER, which stood for Participant Engagement and Empowerment Resource. I filled out my application for what was PEER, hoping beyond hope that I would be accepted. By the end of 2017, I was notified that as of 2018, I would belong to PEER. Finally, a place where I belonged. My first in-person meeting was the spring of 2018, and I remember sitting around a table in a room in a library at the Harvard Medical School. There were outgoing members and incoming members, a couple of UDN genetic counselors, and Emily, our facilitator. My memory has faded just a bit, but I remember talking about the creation of the Facebook group, creating a safe space for all UDN participants and families to join in, to ask their questions, to share their triumphs and their heartbreak. In the 4th edition of our PEER newsletter, which was published in the fall of 2018, it said this: the purpose of the UDN PEER is to support participants and family members in part by creating and sharing resources and to provide the participant and family perspective on UDN research goals and participant experience. PEER provides a post-UDN visit voice, and our goal is to advocate for participants, improve the participant experience, get the word out about the UDN, so to speak, and facilitate interaction between participants and the UDN. In the beginning, we met every other month for about an hour to discuss how to grow the Facebook group, working on our newsletter that we publish 3 times per year, and fielded any needs and questions that various sites had about educational materials that they were putting together for participants. January 2020 marks a shift of the internal work that PEER did to connect with participants and improve the UDN experience to a much broader purpose. On Sunday, January 16th, 2020, Dr. Sessions Cole, also known in our circles as Sesh, attended the PEER online meeting with the purpose of talking about the sustainability of the UDN. Prior to the meeting, Emily, our lead facilitator for peer, wrote us this. As many of you know, UDN is funded by the National Institutes of Health Common Fund until June 30th, 2022. After that point, the funding source for UDN will have to change, and therefore the UDN needs to determine what exactly needs to be sustained to keep a program like this going. For example, what are the most important goals of the UDN and how are they achieved? What should the goals of the UDN in the future be? And what aspects like genetic testing, model organisms, centralized coordination, which of those are the most essential pieces? And I recall reading this email and thinking, everything, all of the parts are essential to the UDN. The testing, the sequencing, the collaboration, the coordination, it was all important and none of it could go away. From my standpoint, the email marked a turning point for peer, from a small but valued working group to a powerhouse that changed the landscape for all who lived with undiagnosed or with an ultra-rare disease. In the note from Emily, she told us that Sesh wanted our feedback and that he would report back to the newly formed UDN Sustainability Work Group. In preparing for this storytelling of sorts, I looked back and found a March 2019 document that crystallized the value and future of the UDN. It said, the UDN has developed not only into a resource for discovery, of accepted participants, but also into a laboratory of innovation in undiagnosed and rare diseases as a model for implementing precision medicine that provides value to the larger community through new science, refined analytic tools, models of best practices, and training in team science of complex rare disease for the next generation of clinicians and scientists. In October 2020, a discussion within the working group began about whether to form a foundation under the umbrella of the NIH or to create a 501c3 nonprofit. Subsequent to that meeting, peer members were invited by the UDN to participate in the sustainability working group. Among others from peer at that time, Megan Halley and Troy Evans became regular attendees of the UDN sustainability work group. While peer members actively engaged with the network's internal sustainability conversations, there were members that worked tirelessly to engage legislative leaders to create awareness about the UDN and interest in providing continued funding for the UDN. I have long said and continue to say, the UDN is a national treasure and should be treated as such. We have the best minds in both clinical research and laboratory science, collaborating with patients to not only solve the most difficult of medical mysteries, but also by providing a diagnosis, it opens the possibility of treatments where there never was before. Troy Evans, Kristen Sisko, and myself, our small but relentless peer team of UDN participants and caregivers, met with legislative leaders who chaired the Legislative Rare Disease Caucus, senators and representatives from Minnesota, Florida, North Carolina, Alabama, and Mississippi. And while every meeting felt like a very small success, it also felt like a painfully heavy lift. And every single time we questioned whether we would be successful in our legislative appeals. While Peer was working to meet with legislative leaders, Senator Blunt of Missouri had been contacted by his local constituent, Michelle Herndon, whose son received his diagnosis from the UDN. He was so moved by her story, the science, the research, the model of care that the UDN offered, that he was compelled to question the acting director of the NIH at a congressional subcommittee hearing in July 2022 about how and whether the NIH would continue to fund the UDN. 5 months later, we learned that Congress had inserted a line item of $18 million to the NIH specifically to continue funding of the UDN. Patients and families did this. Meanwhile, work was being done to form the foundation. Mind you, peer had gone from meeting every 2 months for about an hour to review educational materials that the UDN sites were creating for patients, talking about growing the Facebook page, and putting together a newsletter, to attending several UDN meetings per week, as well as holding weekly peer meetings to update each other on strategy and activity. Not only were we holding meetings with legislators and attending UDN meetings, we were also requesting and having meetings with NIH leadership, as well as penning letters to various NIH and congressional leaders. For many on peer, it was a full-time or at least a very serious part-time volunteer job during a worldwide pandemic. In late winter 2021, it became clear that the foundation was not quite coming together as was hoped, and a small group of leaders needed to take on the bulk of the work. Megan Halley and Troy Evans, our peer co-chairs at the time, along with Helene Sederoth of the UDNI, took on the heavy lift of applying for and establishing the 501c3 that is today the Undiagnosed Diseases Network Foundation. With the support from the leadership, patient and patient caregivers led the effort to establish the first ever patient-centered organization for the undiagnosed population, whose mission it is to improve access to diagnosis, research, and care for all those living with undiagnosed or an ultra-rare condition. What began as a small group that I just felt lucky enough to belong to be with those that understood what it meant to be undiagnosed or have a child to be undiagnosed, grew to be much more than I could have ever dreamed. Ultimately, it was us, patients and caregivers, people who had their own undiagnosed health challenges with their own jobs and families to care for, who dedicated their time and hearts to change the entire landscape for all of us. Beyond having a place to belong, peer provided a foundation for the Undiagnosed Diseases Network Foundation. Peer's work in its early days to push for sustainability so that all can have access to diagnosis and care can now be carried out by an entire patient-centered foundation whose mission is to do just that. I am both incredibly humbled by the work done by so many to ensure the sustainability of a patient-centered network whose mission is to improve access to diagnosis, research, and care, and also so proud to offer all who are undiagnosed a place to belong. So thank you, and I'm thrilled for what UDN, UDNF peer has ahead of them.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was really fascinating to hear the history of peer and the UDNF. So thank you for providing that information. Next up, we have the current peer co-chair, Jessica Swanson. She is the founder of and CEO of Summit Healthcare Services Incorporated, an applied behavioral analysis company that operates across the US in 14 locations. As a board certified behavior analyst, qualified behavior analyst, licensed behavior analyst, and certified autism specialist, she is a board of director on the Qualified Applied Behavior Analysis. Jessica is the founder and CEO of Redpoint Consulting, which manages small startup companies. She is also an advisor to Pathfinder Health. Jessica is married to an active duty officer and has 2 children, and she currently resides in Huntsville, Alabama. Thank you so much, Jessica, for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate having this platform. I'm always happy to share our experience and also to talk about the UDNF peer. So as you probably heard in the introduction, I have my professional life I've devoted to autism. When we were waiting for my daughter to get a full medical diagnosis, she did get an autism diagnosis when she was 2. And from there, my advocacy work started because I just wanted to provide her the best treatment and care possible. And so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go back to school, get my master's, and become an expert in behavior and autism so I could best support her. And so since then, I have been supporting her in that arena of autism, and then all of her, I like to consider them her friends. Like Christine says, I have a practice in 7 states. I'm also a military spouse, and something that we're able to do is support our military families that have kiddos with autism. It's a very underserved area of need. And so I advocate for my military families too. So advocacy has been a big part of my life. And so when I was asked to join Peer in 2022, it was a no-brainer of course I would. And then late in 2023, I was elected co-chair, which is just a huge privilege and honor. And I'm just so glad to be in a space to support the foundation. So a little bit about my daughter. Our rare diagnosis kind of started before she was even born, which is really an unusual situation when you hear about it, because so when we learned that we were expecting our first child, we did know of a family genetic hereditary disorder, very rare, imagine that, called spinocerebellar ataxia type 7. And because it's dominantly inherited, we knew that my husband had it, but he was not symptomatic, but his mother and his sister were. So we did CVS and amniocentesis to see if, you know, our daughter Isla, who would come into this world, had that, because we wanted to prepare to see what kind of life expectancy she had, and just learn as much as we could. This specific genetic disorder is a range, like many disorders, and so depending on the number of repeats in that genetic code, the more repeats that you have is a toxicity, and it causes earlier death and life expectancy and more severe symptoms than if you have a lower, it's called a CAG repeat. It's part of the gene. I can't get into the technical part of genetics, even though I love the undiagnosed and genetic world. It's still a little bit foreign to me. But anyway, those results revealed that Isla did have spinocerebellar ataxia type 7, but it also revealed that her repeats were very low, very similar to my husband, which was reassuring because my husband did not have symptoms. And he still doesn't have symptoms a decade and a little bit over a decade later. So that was reassuring. So we have this beautiful baby on this beautiful day. And I kind of felt like I was the luckiest person in the world, because I knew I had all this testing and my daughter was perfect. Like, there was nothing I knew about this genetic disorder that she had, but she probably wasn't going to be symptomatic for decades and decades to come. And I knew that with science and things like that, she would be okay, but she'd have a very fulfilling long life. And I kind of almost felt like a little bit pompous, I guess, like, oh, I can't believe all these people are having babies and they don't know how, if the genetic makeup and how perfect their kids are. So that was quite ironic, but we did have a blissful first 7 months of a perfect little girl, meeting her milestones, until very suddenly at 7 months old, our whole world changed. And then the journey of rare disease really, really opened up to us. So Isla started having infantile spasms, which is a devastating and catastrophic, as per the textbook's definition of infantile spasms. And there's a lot of reasons why it causes severe seizures, and it causes something called the hypsarrhythmia, which impacts brain development. And so, you know, I thought I had this perfect baby. I did all these testings. She was supposed to be perfect. I knew that she was. And then I was in the ER, you know, with this pretty devastating diagnosis of infantile spasms. The thing about infantile spasms is there's many causes to it. It's not usually just in a vacuum. It could be associated with infections. It can be brain develop, the way that the brain is made up. genetic disorders and things like that. So initially we did all the tests, and everything was perfect. So she'd had an abnormal EEG, which we knew because of spasms, but her MRI was perfect. Her PET scan was perfect. Her spinal fluid was perfect. Everything was perfect. And like any good neurologist, they did the tests for what they thought it could be, very specific test. They also did a genome test, and nothing came back besides what we already knew about the spinocerebellar ataxia. So that was pretty hard, because like Sarah said, I was thrown into this undiagnosed world, really kind of before I even knew it. So I just, when people asked, why does she have epilepsy and infantile spasms, I would say, it's cryptogenic, no known cause. And that was just my go-to. We are military, so we moved a lot. So we'd go to new neurologists. I'd bring my, my binder of medical records and all of those good things. And then I'd say, yeah, she's cryptogenic, no known cause. They ruled out like everything that they possibly could at this point. And that was true for a really long time. Like I said, she was diagnosed with autism when she was 2. And so we focused on those therapies and getting her behavioral health, which is instrumental. And then when she was 3 years old, she was accepted into a clinical trial at University of Alabama, Birmingham, for Epidiolex, which is the pharmaceutical grade of CBD, or cannabis oil. The time that she got accepted to that, we had ruled out any other possibility of helping her with seizures. She had more than just infantile spasms at that point. She was having tonic-clonic, or also known as grand mal seizures, about 8 a day. So that was like her life, was just having seizures. And so she was accepted into the study as our last resort, because we didn't have a diagnosis. We didn't know why she had seizures. And so she was on 5 anti-epileptic just to control to 8 seizures a day. And we had exhausted all other medications. There was nothing else for her to try. She had failed a ketogenic diet, which is commonly used for severe seizures. And she had failed a vagal nerve stimulator, which is almost like a pacemaker battery that's implanted under her chest, and a wire runs up the vagal nerve with the hope of dissipating seizures. That did not work. So right before we got into that trial, the only other option we had at that time was they did a workup for brain surgery, and they didn't know what they were going to operate on, but they thought maybe if they did a corpus callosum, which is where they split the hemispheres, that might help. It was really, like, we were really desperate. Her quality of life was low, and I wasn't sure if she was going to make it with those seizures, because they were pretty intense. And so she was accepted to that trial, and remarkably, unexpectedly, she gained very good seizure control. Within 3 months of starting, she continues to go. She's almost on 9 years of not having a tonic-clonic seizure. So this medication quite literally saved her life, and she's on no other medications. This is a very unusual outcome for a kiddo with seizures, but we'll take it. So that was very exciting. So that was, but the time she was 3.5, 4 years old, she was doing great with seizure control. She had weaned off a lot of her medications that she was on before, and she was in therapy for autism. So we kind of just took each day and did the best we could. We knew that she did not have a diagnosis, and we pretty much thought, I think she'll get a diagnosis in time. Like we're pretty sure it's something genetic, they just haven't identified yet. Like that's how we felt. But it was a lingering question. We had a son who was 2 years younger, who is typically developing, and we didn't know if maybe he inherited something that he could pass on, or maybe he would become symptomatic later on. So it was a lot of unknowns, but we just try to live our best life. I actually did not join social media. I did for like a minute, and it was very stressful to me, because I didn't know about the word and community of undiagnosed. And so I just didn't feel like I fit in. I didn't fit into the autism family, and I didn't fit into the epilepsy, because I had all some little medical stuff. I just didn't feel like we belonged anywhere. So fast forward to 2021, my daughter is accepted into the UDN. And within a year, she did get a diagnosis, which was remarkable. The thing that is really remarkable, though, is that she was diagnosed with CDKL5, which is a mutation, a genetic disorder. But she was tested for that several times before, and it came back negative. And what we know now is, the position of the gene is important in finding a correct diagnosis. And that's an exciting part about being part of the UDN, is that this research will help other families. So maybe other families that have this unusual or outlier genetic mutation that would code appropriately for CDKL5 will be caught sooner. So the reason that the diagnosis meant so much to us is that this disorder, while it affects 1 in 60,000 to 80,000 births, it's a little more common of the rare, uncommon diseases. And there's a whole organization, and the time I got involved with this community, knowing my daughter has this diagnosis, they had just finished preclinical trials for gene therapy, and they'll start clinical trials this year on humans, which is just something I never thought could be possible, because we never had a diagnosis, and having that diagnosis has given us just so much opportunity and potential hope. So this community means so much. And so when I was asked to be part of the UDN peer at the time, now it's UDNF peer, it was an easy yes because of my advocacy work, like I talked about earlier, but also because I went, 10 years without, I guess it was 9 years, let me get the math right, before I knew about the community of undiagnosed. And so it's been, I don't want other families to feel isolated and alone, because it's a lonely, long odyssey. And even though if you don't have someone with the exact symptoms, just knowing that they're going through like the same things would have been very helpful for me. And so I really just want to be able to provide that support. And that's why, I joined peer, and I love being a part of peer. I love telling our story because it is unusual. My daughter has, I would say, like an ultra rare, because she has CDKL5, which is rare, and then she has SCA7, which is rare, and they're totally different things, and they both affect her genes in different ways. So yeah, that's my story, and something that, Sarah did such a great job about explaining all about the UDNF peer and like the history. So I really won't, go over that again, but just to kind of recap some of the amazing things that we're doing is that patient experience, making sure that families feel supported through that whole odyssey. It's not a journey. It's not just a straight line. There's so many things out there trying to get those diagnoses. Having that support from people that get it is huge. We're working, to collaborate with the scientific community. So the cool thing about what we do is we're able to be part of the UDN steering committee and get to, work with, or at least share our stories and listen to what's going on behind the scenes in the medical side of things, which really helps us being able to be good advocates for our patients that come to us, and then also from the researchers and sharing that information. So yeah, patient advocacy, and then just educating our families on, the process, like what they're going to be going through with our navigation system. It's amazing. We have these amazing navigators there to pretty much handhold our people through the journey of the UDM. And then, just having these networks where we can work together to support families. So not only do we try to support while they're getting their diagnosis, if they don't have a diagnosis, we want to be there to support as well. And then hopefully if they do get a diagnosis, helping them navigate those resources. Like for us, it was the CDKL5 community now. So it's more than just a group. And I know Sarah and Amy has said it, and it's just so true. It's really a movement to like a more inclusive and collaborative, patient-centered medical research. This is really a game changer, and we hope that we can set the bar for other people to copy us. We want other communities to do what we're doing, because patient-centered care is the way of the future, and hopefully they can follow our example. So with that is our story. I'm going to send it back to Christine, and thank you so much again for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I really appreciate your vulnerability when you were sharing your story. I'm sure a lot of people on this call who are undiagnosed can relate to your story. In addition to some of the things that Jessica mentioned, there's 3 major activities that Peer does is these lecture series, that there's the newsletter, and also, managing the Facebook group. So I think now we're going to turn it over for some questions if we have any. And I could start it off with a question. It involves all three of you. So from Sarah and Jessica, I would love to hear from you. What do you think is the biggest unmet need in the undiagnosed, ultra rare community? And then Amy, I would love if you could share how the UDNF is working towards addressing this need.
Sure. So Sarah, do you want me to take this one?
Sure, I have an answer too. I don't think we have the same answer. So I think there's a lot
Okay,
of things. So go ahead.
There is a lot of answers. So the unmet need, it really varies by the person and like what they need, and that's the thing. I work with kiddos with autism, and I say, and the saying, like, you met one person with autism, you met one person, because they're so unique. The same with rare disease. And I think that's what's the amazing part of the UDNF peer, is that we're able to really customize and tailor it. We never really, there's protocols and procedures we go through for sure with any organization that must be done, but it's not copy and pasted, right? Like what we do for one person isn't for someone else. And so being able to know what their needs are and being able to help them and support them from that is going to depend from person to person. So that's my answer. And Sarah, I'd love to hear yours.
And now I'm trying to remember your question. Is it like the biggest unmet need, or what is an unmet need?
Oh, I would love to hear what you think is the biggest unmet need for the undiagnosed ultra rare community.
I'll give my answer in two parts. One is I think before the foundation, the biggest unmet need was that there was no place for us. There was no place for us to gather. There was no place for us to organize and move forward on things like policy and patient support and for diagnosis and treatment. So I feel like the foundation really sets the stage for meeting the unmet needs. And there are really many unmet needs, but the foundation is in a position to begin meeting the kind of the broad spectrum of needs. And this, I'm just going to leave it at that. Because I just think it's a rabbit hole that I could go down for 30 minutes. But to me, the foundation, the formation of the foundation is really so incredibly exciting and just opens the door to the possibilities of all of our pillars.
Yeah, I will definitely concur with everything Jessica and Sarah, have shared. The foundation leadership from Peer and leadership from the UDN came together in the summer of 2022 to really talk about all the unmet needs. And as Sarah said, there were so many unmet needs that were identified that it was determined that we needed a patient-led organization for this community. So there was a community for families and patients living with undiagnosed or ultra rare diseases to turn to, knowing that the needs are so unique family to family, but also knowing that there are some common challenges that a lot of families do face. And so the idea of launching the foundation and forming some of our programs really came out of an analysis of what those unmet needs have been and what those big gaps have been for the undiagnosed and ultra rare disease community. And as Jessica mentioned, there are so many unique needs that families have. And so, as we were looking at and thinking about all of those unmet needs, the leadership of the foundation with a lot of input from Peer, really determined that the first program that we needed to launch was the patient family navigation program. So we could work with families one-on-one to help assess their unique needs and help them provide some supports and resources that were tailored specifically to that family. So we're super appreciative you have received funding from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative to launch that program. We've hired 5 patient navigators to work with community members. If community members are interested in enrolling or learning more about that program, there'll be a QR code, I think, that we'll share later, but you can go to our website, udnf.org, and there's actually a form that you can fill out on our website that will connect you with one of our patient navigators. Whether you have one question and want help with one specific thing, or you want to be assigned a navigator to work with you, over time, we really customize and tailor that to every family's unique need. And we look forward to launching other programs down the road to help address some of those other unmet needs that have been addressed.
Thank you. And Sarah, I just had one question for you. You've been involved with Peer for quite some time. What has kept you here with Peer and motivated you to stay?
So much. Well, I think, like I said, in the beginning, it was just to belong, but then you meet so many, I'm drawn to people. My background's in social work. I've worked with people my entire life. I find people interesting and fascinating, and I love connecting with all types of people. So that's just kind of my nature. But I think what keeps me staying is so many things. My drive to make things better for everyone. I am not someone that sits on my laurels and it's like, well, we got just sequencing and like I said in my talk, when we were asked to pick between sequencing or the collaboration or the model organisms, which one is important? They're all important. And so my drive to advocate for the best is what keeps me here. The really brilliant people that I get to hang out with every day, the scientists, the researchers, I love that. I love the patients. I love hearing your stories. I love supporting my fellow caregivers and my fellow UDN participants. And even, as the UDNF grows, we are, connecting with people even outside the UDN. So if you're not a UDN participant, you are still welcome at the UDNF. And so those are the things, it's the people, it's all the people and all the things that keep me interested and keep me loving what I do.
Thank you. I will say, as a participant myself and a peer member, I really feel so blessed to be a part of this network and to be a peer member, because being involved in peer has shown me that the patient's voice really matters within the UDN. And I think for a lot of us undiagnosed, we felt like our voice didn't matter. And so it's really wonderful to belong to such a community that accepts and welcomes all of us. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Amy to discuss a little bit about how to get involved and some of the future events. Thank you so much.
Christine. So to end with, we wanted to leave you with 2 key takeaways. One, we want to invite you to get involved with some of our upcoming events. And on the screen here, you can see we have 2 events happening in April, and we'll have more happening, down the road this year. Our next event is a virtual event you can attend online. It's our Together on Tuesdays series, which Sarah helps lead. Will be taking place April 2nd. And the topic of that event is a 1-hour, online event is on IEPs and 504 plans, and all you can learn. So come to that with your questions and your ideas, what's worked well for you. And we have a team of experts that will be addressing that topic. You can register for that event on our website. And then the other event we're hosting in April, which we're really excited about, we're doing in partnership with the Wilhelm Foundation and the Undiagnosed Diseases Network International, is hosting an Undiagnosed Day event on Monday, April 29th, which is Undiagnosed Day. That event For those that are in the Harvard, Boston area, we'll be in person. You can find some information from us about that on our website as well. There will also be a virtual component. So we will be streaming this across the globe and opening it up to people to attend globally to join us. So that'll be a 2.5-hour online event where we will literally travel the globe and learn about all the different programs that are taking place continent to continent. And then we'll end the 2.5-hour event with a panel of stakeholders that will be talking about from their perspective what we can all do to drive diagnosis and drive that diagnostic odyssey and shorten that timeline for the diagnostic odyssey. So we hope there'll be some really great takeaways from that meeting, and that will also be recorded, and you'll be able to watch that on our website after April 29th. And the second piece is we want to encourage you to get involved. As you know, we have these incredible, ambassadors here with Peer today, Christine, Jessica, and Sarah. There are others, that they work very closely with, but we want to invite all of you to get involved. And there are ways for you to do that. One, we would highly encourage you to sign up for our e-news. So when there are events, our activities coming up, you know about them, and there's a QR code here on the screen, to sign up for our e-news. We also would encourage you to follow us on Facebook. That's another place for community, but also a place to learn about the events and activities and fundraising activities that will be coming up. And we want to encourage you to get involved and help support our mission. And there's many different ways you can do that. You can join our campaign that we're running right now, Making Diagnosis and Treatment Possible for All. Share your story, help create awareness online about your journey, your family's journey, and help us raise money to support our programs like the Patient Family Navigation Program, to fund innovation and innovative projects in research, as well as to help develop better diagnostic tools and technologies. And these are all things that we hope and desire to fund, but it takes support and financial resources to do that. So again, by working together, we feel that we can empower thousands of families on their journey and, really make a huge impact. And as Jessica said, this is a movement, and this movement needs more people to get involved and to help us drive these initiatives forward. So we, again, want to encourage you to attend our upcoming events and invite you to do that. And we want to encourage you to get involved and help support our mission. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you to Amy, Jessica, and Sarah for speaking today. I also want to say thank you to everyone who joined us on the call today, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.